Okay, welcome to an extra special bonus episode, including video for the first time. We were so excited about the soap episode that we decided to bring some additional content with the special help of a guest today. Today, we are joined by not only myself and Andrew Falkowski from our coronavirus bunkers. Andrew's is way less appealing than mine, as you can see. It's like I'm getting a tan while I'm recording this. But we're also joined by Kathy Liu. Kathy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Kathy. I'm a junior at Stanford and I'm studying material science. And all of our classes are online now, so I'm back home in Utah. And since I can't do research in the lab, I thought we'd spread some science online.
Absolutely. Kathy's little sister, Marianne, has been working in my research group, and I have been really excited to meet with Kathy because she works in Zhenan Bao's group at Stanford, working on some really cool materials and has interests in the interface of bioelectronics and other things. So we're excited to have her on board. And Kathy, we told you about the episode on soap, and you said, well, what about hand sanitizers? And so I love that you've put together some additional information on hand sanitizers, on what's their role, how do they kill bacteria, what things do they and don't they kill. So do you guys want to dive into this and explain a little bit how hand sanitizers work and what they're good for?
Yeah, totally. First of all, we want to just preface this by saying that this is not official medical advice. We're here for the science of hand sanitizers. And for any of the official advice, you should go to the CDC or the WHO, the World Health Organization, for their official medical health advisories. So we're here to give you the science of it. But basically, hand sanitizers, you can call them hand antiseptics, hand disinfectants, or hand rubs. They're these liquid or gels that have active ingredients of any types of alcohols. And these will kill bacteria and viruses, most bacteria and viruses. Most of the labels are like 99.99%.
Okay. How do they know, do you think, that 99.99%, how do you think they actually know those numbers? Are they just making that up, or what do you think they do?
Yeah, so this is based on the biology of the kinds of bacteria and viruses that they're targeting. And so basic biology is that viruses, some of them are encapsulated by this lipid bilayer and some of them aren't. And the ones that have the lipid bilayer, that's where the alcohol and the hand sanitizer.
Ah, so they don't actually like expose it to lots of things and test to see whether it killed it or not. They just say like, it should kill it based off of how we know this thing is put together.
Yes, they usually go by the chemistry of the cells. It'd be a little hard to count.
Very cool.
I have to imagine that there's some validation studies on these numbers out there, though. Do you have any experience with those?
I'm going off of what the reviews are saying in literature,
No
but
worries.
I do imagine there's many of those out there.
Very cool. So when people buy a bottle of hand sanitizer, we know that alcohol's in there, right? You can smell it. It makes your hands all kind of dry. You can feel that cooling effect. But I imagine there's more than just alcohol. It's not like we're just dipping our hands in. And by the way, there's lots of different types of alcohol. So what's actually in these things?
Yeah, so first, I mean, you're so right about the different types of hand sanitizers. Like, I have all the Bath and Body Works hand sanitizers from when I was small, like the sparkly ones and like the winter, like fragrance ones. So people put in a lot of things that are like aside from the active ingredient alcohol. First of all, will be like a gelling kind of ingredient, for example, aloe, that'll keep it like on your hand and so it can actually dry. And then they'll add in sometimes other like moisturizers because, like you said, it feels cold on your hand, and that's because alcohol will evaporate. That actually also brings away some water from your hand. So it can be kind of drying to your skin. So moisturizers are helpful. And then you actually do need some water in the hand sanitizer too to help the alcohol actually get into the cells and break apart the viruses and bacteria. And then
Interesting.
anything
So,
that's like
e-
sparkles.
so even if you use like 100% alcohol, that wouldn't necessarily be the best outcome. That water plays an important role.
The water is definitely important. The CDC and the WHO don't recommend using 100% alcohol. In fact, it should be mixed. They recommend percentages of alcohol anywhere above 60% to, I guess, 99.9, or having some. There's actually a formal recipe that the WHO put out if you want to make your own hand sanitizer that we can talk about later. But yeah, there is a percentage that should have water in it.
Cool.
And the reason for including water has to do with the chemistry of the alcohol, right?
Yes, the chemistry is really cool, and there are whole papers that actually go into like the molecular level. And so we were talking about earlier about how like the viruses have a lipid bilayer, and the bilayer, it basically means that a bunch of fat molecules will line up in two layers, and that like envelops the entire virus, and it protects the genetic material that's in the virus. And what an alcohol does is it gets in and it gets into spaces and separates those fat membranes, and then there's like basically holes, and then like the whole virus starts breaking apart because it doesn't have that protective layer anymore, and then the genetic information on the inside is really fragile, and that gets exposed in the environment. That's how it kills the virus.
So how, you introduce it to an alcohol environment. Why would it break up the lipid bilayer? Is there a bonding rationale for this? How do we understand what's actually going on there?
Yeah, so if you look at the alcohol structure, it has the OH group at the end, and then it'll have like carbon chain, and they're considered amphiphilic, which means that it has like multiple polarities. And then what happens is that the hydrogen bonds will actually get in and disrupt with the lipid bilayer, and then that gets like lets water in, and there's these really cool molecular simulations where you see like neat layers, and then you put an alcohol layer, and then you see like the membrane, like the fatty chains just start to like peel off one by one because the alcohol is getting there, and the bonding is more preferential because of those polarity differences, and then everything just starts like scattering.
So cool.
What's also interesting though is that like not all alcohols will work. So the ones that are in hand sanitizer, the ones that are approved are isopropanol, which is also considered IPA, ethanol, which is the one that is in the alcohol that people drink, or propanol. And this is because the chain lengths are different in different alcohols. So methanol, which is sometimes what some people ask about, actually doesn't work in hand sanitizers. It's too short of a chain, and so it actually, like, as a molecule, when it travels with a bunch of water molecules around it. It's like a little posse, and so this makes it really hard for it to wedge into the lipid membranes.
Interesting.
It doesn't work as a hand sanitizer.
I would have assumed that all alcohol sort of did the job, but that's really interesting to learn that it is sort of size and chain dependent. And the ones you said in the bottles that we use are typically isopropyl alcohol?
Yes. Isopropyl alcohol, ethanol, or propanol. Sometimes
Okay,
there's a mix of all three.
cool. So those are pretty chemically stable. Do they have a shelf life that you need to be worried about?
Actually, no. If the alcohol, so the alcohol itself and the hand sanitizer, if it's held in room temperature in a sealed container, then the shelf life should be very, very long time. The only concern is if it evaporates. And so if you're at a higher temperature, or you leave the lid off for a while, then the alcohol has a really low vapor pressure. And so it'll evaporate pretty quickly, and it'll decrease the concentration of your alcohol below that 60% recommended percentage we talked about. And so that's the only concern, when it'll change like the ratio and the effectiveness of your hand sanitizer. So keep it capped, keep it at room temperature, and it'll stay good for a long time.
Okay, very interesting.
And is it possible to make hand sanitizers without using alcohol? Sometimes when I'm going through the internet, you'll see articles talking about a new hand sanitizer that's alcohol-free. How have those worked out, or do they not really exist?
Yeah, so some alcohols are hopping on some hand sanitizer are hopping the trend of being like baby safe or alcohol free. But the biggest one out there uses benzalkonium. And however, there's no evidence that these are any better than alcohol sanitizers. In addition, these different chemicals are actually more toxic to the human body in higher concentrations, and they're much less studied. So experts all recommend sticking to the alcohol-based sanitizers, and that's what they use in all the medical settings.
Interesting. So in the hospital, they're using alcohol.
They are. Fun fact, actually, a lot of the hand sanitizers are 99.99% killing for bacteria and viruses, but in the hospital settings, they require that their sanitizers are above 99.99%.
No way.
However they measure that.
So they have to be even better. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So what do these things kill?
Yes. So Alcohol-based hand sanitizers will kill most of the bacteria and viruses that have the lipid bilayer, but they won't kill everything, which includes some protozoan oocysts, bacterial spores. They also don't kill anything that doesn't have that lipid bilayer. So, for example, norovirus is one that sanitizer doesn't work against. That is the leading cause of illness and outbreaks from contaminated foods in the US.
I did not know that didn't kill it. Norovirus is horrific. I've been assuming that my hand sanitizer was saving me, and that stuff is bad news. So that's good to know.
Yeah, 90% of diarrheal disease outbreaks on cruise ships are caused by norovirus. So if you're on a cruise, it probably is better to use soap and water in addition to sanitizer.
Yeah, and I guess that's something that's good to point out. Just like this is a supplementary episode to the hand washing, hand sanitizer in general can be a great supplement to hand washing. Hand washing is clearly the gold standard, but hand sanitizer can be a nice supplement when you don't have a sink right there handy nearby.
Yeah, they're nice and portable now. You can get a little one, just attach it to the keychain on your backpack and just carry it around.
I do that to my kids when they go to school. They take their little hand sanitizer with them.
I thought you were saying a portable sink. I was like, on your keychain, what?
I'm a scientist, and so it just seemed possible, and I had to do it.
Yeah, the hand washing versus sanitizer debate, they're different methods. So washing is literally just washing and rubbing everything off your hands. And the sanitizer, whatever's on your hand will still be on your hand, but it'll just be dead if the alcohol works.
Yeah, that's right.
So
Okay.
if your hands are really grimy or if they're really oily, then sanitizer actually won't work as well just because the alcohol can't cover everything, and it'll just all still be on your hands. So if you're also dealing with like pesticides or heavy metals, that's also not something sanitizer will help with. You should wash your hands.
So what else should we know about these hand sanitizers? I'm going to play devil's advocate because I know somebody out there's done it. Can you drink them? Is that a good idea? Is that a terrible idea?
If you're no.
To nobody's surprise, it's a bad idea to drink hand sanitizer. Don't do it.
It will not clean your insides. It's not the same as drinking alcohol. There's no reason you should be drinking hand sanitizer.
I'm sure it can make you sick because it is very concentrated, obviously, in terms of alcohol, but also it has lots of the chemicals, which you probably shouldn't be ingesting.
Yeah, definitely. And different types of alcohol, we only are on the shelves, it's all ethanol. And so the different types of alcohol, propanol, IPA, those are not ones you should be drinking. They cause alcohol poisoning. The US Poison Control Centers receive almost 85,000 calls from 2011 to 2015 about hand sanitizer in children. So just because they're
Holy
sparkling
smokes.
doesn't mean they are any more fruity or drinkable.
I get it. I have a 3-year-old. I get why they would try that. Well, what else should we know about these? Anything else?
They are rather flammable is one thing to know because alcohol is a very flammable substance. It's not a huge concern. There haven't been that many reports of alcohol sanitizers bursting into flames, but if you have a large supply, then it's probably not a good idea to leave it near the stove. Let's see.
So what happens to these 0.01% of bacteria that do survive?
Yeah,
Is there any risk there?
So there's a whole debate
things like norovirus.
Yeah, so the ones that don't get killed, those are still out and about, which is why people should still wash their hands. There's also a debate about if they develop resistance or not. And it's been shown that for the most part, that most bacteria aren't able to develop like new membrane like capabilities or anything because alcohol, it's like a chemical method, not some kind of biological mechanism to pierce the shells there. So it's not shown to like actually proven to have bacterial resistance, but it is something to be wary of that it doesn't kill everything.
Interesting. Well, if people want to go to the store and buy some and they can't find any, we know that it is possible to make your own. Now, it may be hard to find the chemicals to make your own, but the World Health Organization actually has a recipe. Do you want to share it with us, Kathy?
Yes, this is super exciting. So we can link this later, which would be cool because they have a great walkthrough. But the World Health Organization has put out, there are 2 recipes.
So the World Health Organization has 2 recipes.
Yeah, they have one if you have ethanol, the other one's if you have IPA. And
by the way, rubbing alcohol, if that's what you have in your cabinet, that's IPA, that's isopropyl alcohol.
Yes, good point. And then, so either of those, and then the other ingredients are all the same. So you take hydrogen peroxide, which will be responsible for killing some of the bacteria that the alcohols can't get to. Then you add glycerol, which is a thickening agent.
To make it sort of a gel?
Yes.
Okay.
And then the last ingredient, like we talked about before, is adding water. And you should use sterile water, which would be either distilled or you can boil it and then cool it back down, just to make sure you're not adding bacteria into your hand sanitizer. And then you just mix everything. So they have a manual that we can put a link into where they have the different measurements for how much, but basically their formulations will make it so that the ethanol is 80% if you're using ethanol, or the IPA will be 75%, both within those good percentages. And you just take everything, stir it, and then let it actually sit for 3 days just to like
really
settle. Yes, and then you're good. Then you have hand sanitizer.
Very cool. Now, I couldn't help but notice in your notes that you sent over that you said the appropriate amount of hand sanitizer is 3 milliliters, or the size of a sequin. You have to tell me what a sequin is. How much am I talking about? Is that like a pea? Is that like a couple of peas? Is that a marble? How much do they say to use?
You know the sequins that they do in like arts and crafts? Like, I would say it's like 2 peas probably.
Okay, a couple of peas.
Yeah, and that's a great point, that you should be using enough, first of all, and you also need to have it on your hands for long enough. A lot of people will put it on their hands and then like rub it off, and that actually like destroys the purpose of using that much. You're supposed to use 3 mils, keep it on your hands for at least 20 to 25 seconds to make sure that all the alcohol has gone on your hands, done its job, and evaporated.
So when your hands are dry, you're done. You shouldn't wipe it off before.
Yeah, you should just let it air dry.
Okay. Well, anything else you want to add? Thanks for this awesome update to our soap episode. This is going to be a nice compliment to it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's all I had to share.
All right,
yeah, that's
Andrew.
A lot easier than making soap. We had some animal fat left over, and I was like, I wonder how I can transform this. Then I started going online and looking at all the calculations in the process. It's like, no, I don't want to do this.
If I could just get some of that Mediterranean ash from that plant, you'd be set.
Yeah, that's what I need.
Some quicklime lying around your house.
I'll start digging.
Actually, there's one other thing that I just remembered now that you're talking about like household materials, that some people have been trying to make sanitizer from their drinking alcohols, and that's not advised because most alcohols are not high enough percentage. So like Tito's vodka actually had to like put out an advisory and be like, we are not hand sanitizer, like do not use us. So make sure you're using, if you're making it, the high percentages.
Gotcha.
You have to get some Zhebrovka.
All right. Andrew, any words of advice as we go back to the coronavirus wasteland in which we live? Anything else our listeners should know about?
No, none that I can tell. Just stay inside and don't contaminate others.
Okay. We will join you next month, as always, with another episode. It might be over Zoom because Andrew is quarantined in Idaho and I am quarantined in Utah. So it might be another Zoom episode, but we will have another wonderful episode coming up next month.
Enjoy the beach, Dr. Sparks.
Will do. We'll see you guys next time.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
See ya.
The inventors of fire, electricity, magnetism, iron, lead, glass, silk, cotton, the makers of tools, the captors of lightning, the architect, the engineer, the musician, are all beneficiaries of the materials of this world and are bound only by their imaginations in manipulating those materials.